The Omega served wine to the Alpha King without knowing, until his wolf stood and whispered, "Mate." Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. Amelia had spent her whole life in the shadows, never quite fitting in with the other members of her pack. An Omega with no wolf to call her own, she was often overlooked and ridiculed for her inability to shift. She had no scent, no power, and no place among the alphas and betas who ruled her world. But that night, everything would change. Amelia had been asked to serve wine at a royal gathering, something that usually wouldn't even have been considered for someone like her. She moved quietly through the room, her eyes focused on the ground, trying to avoid drawing attention. She was used to the whispers and the cold stares, but tonight, she was invisible. At least, that was what she thought. As she approached the Alpha King, Kaelen, sitting at the head of the table, she handed him a glass of wine, unaware that this simple action would alter the course of her life forever. She had heard of the Alpha King. Of course, everyone had. He was known as the most powerful alpha in the entire kingdom, his presence enough to send shivers down anyone's spine. But Amelia had never truly seen him. She didn't know the face behind the stories or the man behind the legend. Kaelen took the wine from her, his cold silver eyes briefly meeting hers, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. She couldn't place it, but something deep inside her stirred. Her heart raced, and she quickly looked away, telling herself it was just nerves. But as the night wore on, something changed. Kaelen, the ruthless and untouchable Alpha King, rose to his feet. His movements were fluid, graceful, and yet filled with an undeniable power. Amelia watched, her breath catching in her throat. She saw the change first, his body shifting, the muscles rippling beneath his skin as he began to transform. And then, before her very eyes, his wolf stood tall, its piercing eyes locking onto hers. She froze, unable to move, her heart pounding in her chest. The wolf's voice was a low growl, but Amelia heard it clear as day. "Mate." The world around her seemed to stop. She had served wine to the Alpha King, never knowing that she was his fated mate, and now, she was caught in the whirlwind of a bond that would change everything. Kaelen stepped forward, his wolf slowly shifting back to his human form, and for the first time, Amelia saw him in his full glory. His eyes, filled with something she couldn't quite understand, locked onto hers. "You," he said, his voice a low whisper. "You are mine." Amelia stood there, her mind racing, trying to comprehend what had just happened. She was an Omega, and he was the most powerful Alpha in the world. How could this be? But before she could ask any questions, Kaelen took a step toward her, his presence overwhelming, filling the room with an air of dominance. And in that moment, Amelia realized that her life would never be the same again. Amelia stood frozen, staring at the Alpha King, still struggling to comprehend the words that had just escaped his lips. "You are mine." The words felt like a weight in her chest, too heavy to bear, but at the same time, there was a strange warmth spreading through her, a feeling she had never known. She had spent her entire life in the shadows, cast aside by her pack for not being like the others, and now, here she was, standing before the most powerful alpha in the kingdom, being claimed as his mate. Her heart raced as her mind struggled to process the reality of the situation. Was this some kind of cruel joke? How could she, an Omega with no wolf, be the chosen mate of someone like Kaelen? She had never shifted, never been able to. Her scent had always been faint, and her pack had made it clear that she was a disappointment. But now, standing in front of him, her world was being turned upside down. Kaelen stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. His silver eyes never left hers, his gaze intense, almost as if he was searching for something within her. "Amelia," he spoke again, his voice softer this time, yet still filled with power. "You are more than you realize." Amelia took a step back, her legs shaky beneath her, but Kaelen's gaze followed her, unwavering. She couldn't tear herself away from his eyes, as if they held some kind of magic. The room around them seemed to disappear, and all that mattered was the connection she felt, strange as it was. "Why me?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Kaelen tilted his head slightly, as if considering her question. "Because fate has brought us together. You are my mate, Amelia. The moon has chosen you, and so have I." His words made her breath catch in her throat. She had always heard stories about mates, about the bond that could never be broken, but she never thought it would happen to her. And certainly not with someone as powerful as Kaelen. Amelia's mind raced. She didn't know how to respond. She had always been taught to be humble, to accept her place in the world. But this was beyond anything she had ever imagined. She was just a broken Omega, and yet, here she was, the chosen one. "But I'm not like the others," she stammered, her voice shaking. "I can't shift. I'm not even really an Omega. I don't belong in your world." Kaelen stepped even closer, his presence radiating warmth. "You are more than your wolf, Amelia. You are my mate, and that is all that matters. I see you, not as an Omega, but as the person you truly are." His words washed over her like a wave, and for the first time in her life, Amelia felt seen. She felt heard. She felt like she mattered. "I don't know what to do," she whispered, her eyes dropping to the floor. "I've never been more scared in my life." Kaelen reached out, lifting her chin gently with his fingers, forcing her to meet his gaze. "You don't have to do anything, Amelia. Just be with me. Trust me, and I will protect you, always." His voice was a promise, one that made her heart flutter. Amelia swallowed hard, trying to steady her breath. This was happening. She was standing in front of the Alpha King, the most powerful man in the kingdom, and he was offering her something she had never thought possible, a place by his side. The thought was overwhelming, but there was also something comforting in it. She had always longed for a sense of belonging, for someone to see her for who she truly was. And now, that someone was Kaelen. But there was still fear in her heart. Fear of the unknown, fear of the future. "How do I know I can trust you?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. Kaelen smiled softly, his expression full of warmth and understanding. "You don't have to know everything right now, Amelia. Trust comes with time. But I promise you, I will never hurt you." Amelia nodded slowly, her heart still racing but slowly starting to calm. She was terrified, but there was also something else. Hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something new. Something beautiful. Kaelen took a step back, his eyes never leaving hers. "Come with me," he said, his voice filled with quiet authority. "Let me show you our future together." Amelia hesitated for a moment, but then, without thinking, she took a step forward. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in her life, she was willing to find out. Together, they walked out of the room, hand in hand, and Amelia knew that her life would never be the same again. Amelia followed Kaelen through the grand hall, her heart still racing from the whirlwind of emotions she had just experienced. The weight of what had just happened pressed heavily on her chest, but there was also a strange sense of calm beginning to settle over her. Kaelen's presence was reassuring, his confidence radiating from him in waves. She had never felt safer, even though she was still unsure of what her future held. She had been claimed by the Alpha King, a man she had once only heard of in stories, and now she was walking beside him as if it was the most natural thing in the world. As they reached the large, ornate doors of Kaelen's chambers, he turned to her with a soft smile, the intensity in his silver eyes now replaced with something gentler. "Come inside, Amelia," he said, his voice low and warm. "This is where we'll begin." Amelia stepped inside, her eyes taking in the lavish room around her. It was nothing like the simple cottage she had grown up in. Everything here was rich, opulent, and awe-inspiring. The massive four-poster bed with its velvet curtains, the grand fireplace that stretched up to the ceiling, and the intricate tapestries on the walls that told stories of battles won and kingdoms conquered. All of it was overwhelming. She had never imagined a life like this, and yet, here she was, standing in the heart of it. "This is your new home, Amelia," Kaelen said, his voice gentle as he took her hand in his. "This is where we will build our future together." Amelia swallowed hard, trying to steady her nerves. "I don't know if I can live up to this," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm just an Omega. I don't know how to fit into your world." Kaelen's grip on her hand tightened, and he stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "You're not just an Omega, Amelia. You are my mate. and that is all that matters. This world, this life, it's yours now too. His words were like a balm to her aching soul, and for the first time in her life, she began to believe that she might actually have a place in the world. Kaelen led her to a chair by the fireplace, and they sat together in silence for a few moments, the crackling of the fire the only sound filling the room. Amelia's mind was still racing, trying to process everything that had happened. She had been rejected, cast aside, and now, here she was, the mate of the Alpha King. It didn't feel real. Amelia. Kaelen spoke softly, breaking the silence. I know this is overwhelming, and I understand your fears. You don't have to do anything right away. Just let me show you what this bond means. Amelia looked up at him, her heart heavy with uncertainty. I don't understand it, Kaelen. How can I be your mate? I'm not like the others. I don't have the strength. I don't have the wolf inside me. Kaelen smiled, a look of understanding in his eyes. You don't need to be like the others, Amelia. You don't need to have a wolf to be my mate. You have something far more powerful, your heart, your strength, and your spirit. That is all I need. Amelia felt her chest tighten at his words. She had always thought of herself as weak, broken, and now, Kaelen was telling her that those things didn't matter. But what if I fail you? She asked, the fear creeping back into her voice. What if I'm not strong enough to stand by your side? Kaelen's gaze softened, and he reached out to gently lift her chin, forcing her to meet his eyes. You won't fail me, Amelia. We are bound together by fate, and that bond is unbreakable. No matter what happens, I will be by your side. His words were like a promise, and Amelia felt a flicker of hope begin to grow within her. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something beautiful. I don't know what the future holds, she said softly, but I'm willing to find out with you. Kaelen smiled, his hand gently brushing her hair away from her face. And I will be right here, every step of the way. They sat together in the quiet of the room, the fire casting a warm glow around them. Amelia still didn't fully understand everything that was happening, but for the first time in her life, she felt like she had a place, a purpose. And as she looked into Kaelen's eyes, she realized that she might just have found her home. The future was uncertain, but with him by her side, she was ready to face whatever came next. Amelia woke the next morning to the soft light of dawn filtering through the grand curtains of Kaelen's chambers. She had spent the night in the room next to his. The room she had been told was now hers. The events of the previous day seemed like a dream, a whirlwind of emotions, confusion, and wonder. The Alpha King had claimed her as his mate, and now, she was here, in his world, with him by her side. She stood slowly, her body still adjusting to the sudden change in her life, and walked over to the window. The morning sun was rising, casting a golden glow over the sprawling castle grounds. She could see the lush gardens below, the vibrant flowers in full bloom. For the first time in her life, she felt like she could breathe. She wasn't just an Omega anymore. She wasn't the broken, discarded girl from her pack. She was Kaelen's mate. That thought alone still felt unreal. Amelia had never imagined she would be in this position. She had spent years feeling invisible, unloved, and unwanted. But now, here she was, about to start a new chapter in her life, a chapter she never thought possible. As she gazed out at the view, she heard a soft knock at the door. Amelia? Kaelen's voice came through, gentle yet strong, just like him. She turned to face the door, feeling a flutter in her chest. Come in, she called softly. The door opened, and Kaelen stepped inside, his presence as commanding as ever. He was dressed in simple, yet regal, clothing, his dark hair falling just past his shoulders. His silver eyes locked onto hers, and a small smile tugged at the corner of his lips. Good morning, he said, his voice deep and soothing. Amelia smiled, her heart racing in her chest. Good morning, she replied. Kaelen stepped closer to her, his gaze softening as he looked at her. How did you sleep? He asked, his voice filled with genuine concern. Amelia paused for a moment before answering. It was strange, she admitted. Everything feels so different. I don't know if I'm ready for all of this. Kaelen reached out, gently taking her hand in his. You don't have to be ready, Amelia, he said softly. You just have to trust me, and I'll be here with you every step of the way. His words were reassuring, but Amelia still felt a pang of doubt. She was still the same girl she had always been, wasn't she? A girl who had no wolf, no true power. Could she really fit into this world? The world of alphas and power? I don't know if I can do this, she said, her voice trembling slightly. I don't know if I can be what you need. Kaelen's expression softened, and he pulled her into his arms, holding her close. Amelia, he whispered, you are everything I need. Don't ever doubt that. You don't need to change who you are to be with me. Just be yourself. Amelia closed her eyes, allowing herself to relax into his embrace. She had never felt more cared for, more cherished. Kaelen was right. She didn't need to change. She didn't need to be anyone else. She only needed to be the person she was, and that was enough for him. Kaelen pulled back slightly, his hands resting on her shoulders as he looked down at her with a soft smile. We have a long day ahead of us, he said. There's so much to learn, so much to do. But we will take it slow, together. Amelia nodded, her heart swelling with a mix of emotions. I'm ready, she said, her voice filled with newfound determination. Kaelen's smile grew wider, and he leaned in to kiss her forehead gently. I knew you would be, he said softly. Now, let's begin our journey together. Amelia took a deep breath, feeling a sense of peace wash over her. She didn't know what the future held, but with Kaelen by her side, she was ready to face whatever came next. She had found her place, her purpose, and for the first time in her life, she felt truly seen, truly loved. And that was all that mattered. Amelia followed Kaelen through the castle as they made their way to the training grounds, her mind still reeling from everything that had happened. It felt like only yesterday she had been serving wine to the Alpha King without any idea of who he truly was. Now, she was walking beside him, not as a servant, but as his mate. The transition had been overwhelming, but with each passing moment, Amelia felt more and more at peace with her place in this new world. As they reached the training grounds, Kaelen turned to her with a slight smile. This is where we begin, he said, his voice steady. Here, you will learn what it means to be my mate, to be part of this world. Amelia nodded, though part of her still felt unprepared. She had never been trained for such a life, and the thought of being the mate of the Alpha King came with both excitement and fear. She had no wolf, no powers to call her own. What could she possibly offer to this world of strength and power? But as Kaelen led her to the center of the training grounds, where a group of warriors were sparring, she realized something. She didn't have to be like them. She didn't need to wield a sword or command a pack to be valuable. She was already enough. I know you're nervous, Kaelen said, noticing the uncertainty in her eyes. But you are stronger than you realize. Your heart, your soul, that is what matters the most. Amelia looked up at him, her eyes searching his face. He had never made her feel like less, never made her feel like her lack of shifting ability made her unworthy. She had always felt like an outcast, someone who didn't belong. But with Kaelen, she felt like she could be more. You're not here to fight, Kaelen continued. You're here to learn the ways of the pack, to understand the balance of power, and to stand beside me. Your role is just as important as anyone else's. Amelia took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his words sink in. For the first time, she believed him. She wasn't just an Omega, a broken soul who could never shift. She was his mate, and that meant something. The warriors around them noticed Kaelen's presence and immediately stopped what they were doing, bowing their heads in respect. Kaelen nodded at them, his eyes scanning the group before settling on one of the more experienced fighters. I want you to teach Amelia how to defend herself, Kaelen instructed. Not to fight like a warrior, but to understand the strength within her. She needs to know that even without the wolf, she can protect herself. The warrior, a tall man with dark hair and a scar over his cheek, stepped forward. As you command, my king, he said with a respectful bow. Amelia, Kaelen turned to her. This is Roran. He will teach you what you need to know. Amelia swallowed, her nerves flaring up again, but Kaelen's steady gaze calmed her. She nodded to Roran, who smiled reassuringly. We'll start slow, Roran said, his voice kind but firm. The most important thing is to find your balance. Strength doesn't always come from muscle. They began with simple movements, teaching her to stand firm, to hold herself in a way that radiated confidence. Amelia struggled at first, her body not used to the discipline, but she listened to Roran's instructions carefully, focusing on her breathing, on centering herself. As the day went on, she began to feel a shift within herself. Each movement, each stance, built her confidence, and by the end of their session, Amelia was standing tall, feeling a strength she never knew she had. Kaelen watched from a distance, his eyes filled with pride. He knew that this was just the beginning for her. She had already come so far in such a short time. As Amelia finished the last of her training, she walked over to Kaelen, her legs tired but her spirit stronger than ever. "How did I do?" she asked, her voice tentative. Kaelen smiled, his silver eyes gleaming with approval. "You did more than I could have ever hoped for," he said, taking her hand in his. "You are ready, Amelia." For the first time, Amelia felt like she truly belonged. She wasn't just Kaelen's mate. She was a part of this world, and she was ready to face whatever came next, with Kaelen by her side. She had found her strength, her place, and most importantly, her future. Amelia stood at the edge of the balcony, the cool night air brushing against her skin as she looked out over the kingdom. It had been several weeks since she had begun her training, and though every day had been a challenge, she could feel herself growing stronger. Not physically, as she had no wolf to call her own, but emotionally, mentally. Being by Kaelen's side had opened a part of her she didn't know existed. For so long, she had been told she was worthless, that she would never amount to anything. She had believed it. But now, as she stood here, gazing at the vast land below, she realized how much she had changed. Her heart still raced whenever she thought about the bond she shared with Kaelen. They had been mates from the moment they met, and although it felt like a dream, it was a dream she never wanted to wake from. She wasn't just a broken Omega anymore. She was someone who mattered, someone who was needed. "You look beautiful." Kaelen's voice broke through her thoughts, and Amelia turned to see him standing in the doorway, his silver eyes shining in the moonlight. He stepped forward, his presence filling the room like a gentle storm, powerful and comforting all at once. "Thank you," Amelia said softly, a small smile tugging at her lips. She had never felt beautiful before. She had always been the odd one out, the girl who couldn't shift, the one who wasn't chosen. But with Kaelen, she felt different. She felt seen, loved. Kaelen walked toward her, his hand reaching out to gently tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. His touch was electric, sending a shiver down her spine. "You've come so far," he said, his voice full of pride. "I'm proud of you, Amelia." Amelia felt her chest tighten at his words. She had never known what it felt like to be proud of herself, but with Kaelen, she was starting to. "I couldn't have done it without you," she replied quietly, looking into his eyes. Kaelen smiled, his gaze softening. "You're stronger than you think. You've always been strong." Amelia shook her head slightly, the weight of his words settling on her heart. She had spent so long doubting herself, but with Kaelen, she didn't need to doubt anymore. She didn't need to be like everyone else. She didn't need to be anything but herself. "I don't know what the future holds," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I know I'm ready to face it with you." Kaelen stepped closer, his hand gently brushing against hers. "We'll face it together," he said, his voice steady and reassuring. "I'll always be here, Amelia. You'll never have to face anything alone." Amelia felt a lump form in her throat at his words. She had never had anyone to rely on, never had someone to stand by her side. But now, with Kaelen, she felt like she could conquer anything. "I trust you," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I trust you with everything I have." Kaelen's eyes softened, and he took her hand in his, holding it tightly. "And I trust you," he replied, his voice filled with sincerity. "You are my mate, Amelia, and nothing will ever change that." They stood there for a moment, their hands intertwined, the weight of their bond filling the space between them. It was a connection that transcended words, a connection that neither time nor distance could break. Amelia had never believed in fate before, but now, standing with Kaelen, she knew that fate had brought them together for a reason. She wasn't just a weak, rejected Omega anymore. She was Kaelen's mate, his equal, and she was ready to embrace whatever the future held. As the moonlight bathed them both in its soft glow, Amelia felt at peace for the first time in her life. She didn't need to have all the answers, didn't need to know what was to come. She only knew that with Kaelen by her side, she could face anything. "Let's go inside," Kaelen said softly, his hand still holding hers. "We have a long journey ahead of us, but we'll take it one step at a time." Amelia nodded, a sense of calm washing over her as they turned to walk back into the warmth of their shared chambers. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew they would face them together. And for the first time in her life, that was enough. Amelia and Kaelen stood side by side, looking out over the kingdom from the highest tower of the castle. The view stretched out before them, the rolling hills, the thick forests, and the distant mountains, all bathed in the warm light of the setting sun. It was a breathtaking sight, one that Amelia had never thought she would see, and certainly not from the place where she now stood. She was no longer just a servant, no longer just the Omega who had no place in the world. She was Kaelen's mate, and she belonged in this world. The weight of the transformation in her life still amazed her, but with each passing day, she felt more at home. Kaelen stood beside her, his presence as commanding as ever, but there was something different now, something tender in the way he looked at her. She had been afraid of the power he held, afraid of the responsibilities that came with being his mate, but in these quiet moments, she realized that his strength wasn't something to fear. It was something she could lean on. "I've never been up here before," Amelia said softly, her voice carrying on the breeze. "It's incredible." Kaelen glanced at her, a slight smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "You're more than worthy of being here, Amelia," he said, his voice steady and full of assurance. "You belong here with me." Amelia turned to face him, her heart swelling with emotions she didn't quite know how to express. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with gratitude. "For everything." Kaelen reached out, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face, his touch light and tender. "You don't need to thank me," he said, his voice soft. "You're my mate. I will always protect you, always be by your side." Amelia felt a rush of warmth spread through her chest at his words. It was still so new, this bond, this connection they shared, but it was undeniable. She could feel it, deep within her, this pull that drew her to him. It wasn't just a mate bond. It was something deeper, something that transcended mere fate. It was love. "I never thought I could have something like this," Amelia said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I always thought I was broken, that I would never fit in. But now—" Her voice trailed off, and Kaelen stepped closer, his hand resting on her cheek. "You're not broken," he said firmly, his eyes locking onto hers with intensity. "You are everything I need. You've always been everything I need." Amelia blinked back the tears that threatened to spill over. She had spent so much of her life feeling less than, feeling like she didn't matter, but with Kaelen, she felt seen. She felt like she mattered, like she was worth something. "I've never known what it feels like to be loved," she said quietly, the vulnerability in her voice raw. "But with you, I feel like I finally belong." Kaelen's gaze softened, and he cupped her face in his hands, tilting her chin up gently so that their eyes met. "You belong to me, Amelia," he whispered, his voice low and soothing. "And I belong to you. Always." A quiet silence settled between them, the weight of their bond hanging in the air, thick and undeniable. Amelia felt as though the world had fallen away, leaving only the two of them in this moment. It was as if time itself had paused, allowing them to breathe in this space, in this love, without any fear of what the future might bring. Kaelen leaned down, his lips brushing against her forehead in a soft, lingering kiss. "We'll face everything together," he murmured. "Nothing will ever tear us apart." Amelia closed her eyes, leaning into his touch, feeling the warmth of his body, the strength of his love. She had never felt more certain of anything in her life. With Kaelen by her side, she could face whatever challenges lay ahead. They would face them together, as equals, as mates. The future was no longer a source of fear for her. It was a promise that she would never be alone again. "I love you," she whispered, her words a soft confession that had been waiting to escape for so long. Kaelen's eyes shone with emotion as he looked at her, and in that moment, she knew that he loved her too. "I love you too, Amelia," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "Forever." Amelia smiled, the words she had always longed to hear finally spoken aloud. She had found her place in this world, beside the man who loved her, the man who saw her for who she truly was. And with him, she knew she could face anything. Together, they would carve out a future filled with love, strength, and unwavering devotion. The bond they shared was unbreakable, and Amelia knew, deep in her soul, that this was only the beginning of their journey. Amelia woke to the sound of the soft chirping of birds outside the window, the warm sunlight filtering through the curtains, casting a gentle glow across the room. She stretched her arms, feeling the calmness of the morning settle over her. But there was still an underlying excitement in her chest. Today was the day they would leave for the northern borders, a journey Kaelen had been preparing for. It was a mission of both personal and political importance, one that would take them through the heart of the kingdom. As she lay there, her thoughts began to drift to all that had happened in the past few weeks. Since that moment in the castle, when Kaelen had claimed her as his mate, everything had shifted. She had found strength she never knew she had, and a love so pure, it felt like it was always meant to be. Yet, the journey they were about to embark on would test everything. The world they lived in was not kind to those who held power, and Kaelen, as Alpha King, carried the weight of his position with both grace and a quiet intensity that made Amelia admire him even more. She had never imagined a life like this, and now, as she sat up, the reality of their bond seemed to settle into her bones. She was not just a companion to Kaelen, she was his equal. Amelia stood and walked over to the window, pulling the curtains back to gaze at the vast kingdom stretching out before her. It was beautiful, in a raw and untamed way, just like Kaelen. It was a world full of challenges, but with Kaelen by her side, she no longer feared what lay ahead. She had always doubted her place in the world, but now, standing on the edge of it, she felt that she belonged. Amelia. Kaelen's voice came from behind her, soft but filled with the authority she had come to respect. She turned to face him, her heart skipping a beat. Kaelen was standing in the doorway, dressed in his armor, looking every bit the king he was. But there was something in his gaze that softened the steel of his appearance. His eyes, those silver eyes that had captivated her from the very beginning, met hers with a warmth that melted her heart. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice low and steady. Amelia nodded, her heart swelling with love and pride. "I'm ready," she said, her voice firm but full of emotion. Kaelen walked over to her, closing the distance between them, and gently took her hand in his. "You're not just my mate, Amelia," he said softly, his voice full of sincerity. "You're my partner, and I will need you by my side more than ever in the days ahead." Amelia felt a rush of warmth spread through her chest. She had always been afraid of being left behind, of not being enough, but with Kaelen, she knew that was not a possibility. "I will be with you every step of the way," she replied, her voice steady, the truth of her words ringing clear. Kaelen smiled, his hand lifting to gently caress her cheek. "I know," he said, "and that means more to me than you could ever know." The tenderness in his touch, the honesty in his voice, filled Amelia with a sense of peace she hadn't known she was missing. She wasn't just his mate. She was his strength, his confidant, and the one person who would walk beside him through whatever trials lay ahead. They stood there for a moment, their hands entwined, the silence between them comfortable and full of understanding. Kaelen leaned down and kissed her forehead, a soft gesture that spoke volumes more than words ever could. "Let's go," he said quietly, his voice filled with resolve. "It's time." Amelia nodded, her heart racing as they walked out of the room together, ready to face whatever awaited them. The journey ahead would be filled with uncertainty, but she knew one thing. For certain, she wasn't alone. With Kaelen by her side, she could face anything. Together, they would conquer whatever came their way. And as they made their way through the castle halls, the weight of the future no longer felt as heavy. It felt like a promise, one they would fulfill together. Amelia stood beside Kaelen as they arrived at the northern border of the kingdom. The cold wind blew through the trees, carrying with it the scent of pine and earth. She could see the distant mountains in the horizon, their peaks capped with snow, marking the boundary between their kingdom and the wild lands beyond. It was a place of both beauty and danger, a place where power, tradition, and the will of the Alpha King held sway. She had never been here before, but standing by Kaelen's side, she felt a deep connection to the land. This was where they would prove their strength, where their future together would unfold. As they approached the meeting grounds, the tension in the air was palpable. A group of leaders from the northern clans had gathered, waiting for Kaelen's arrival. Amelia had heard stories of these northern warriors, ruthless, strong, and proud. They were not easily impressed, and their loyalty had to be earned. Kaelen's presence, however, commanded attention. Even as they approached, the crowd parted, a silent respect passing through the gathered warriors. Amelia felt the weight of their gazes, but she stood tall, knowing that she belonged by Kaelen's side. Kaelen turned to her, his silver eyes locking with hers. "Stay close to me," he said softly, but there was a steel in his voice that reassured her. "I will." Amelia nodded, her heart steadying in her chest. She had faced so much uncertainty, but with Kaelen, she felt invincible. Together, they could face anything. As they walked into the circle of leaders, Kaelen's voice rang out, commanding and strong. "I come not only as your king, but as your mate's protector. We stand together as one." His words echoed in the stillness, and Amelia could see the respect begin to shift in the crowd's eyes. She was more than just a symbol. She was his equal, his partner. "Amelia," Kaelen said, his hand reaching for hers, "step forward with me." Amelia felt the weight of the moment, but she stepped forward, standing beside him with her head held high. She was no longer the broken Omega who had once been discarded. She was his mate, his equal, and she belonged in this world. The leaders began to speak, their voices low and cautious, testing Kaelen's resolve. But with every word that was spoken, Amelia could feel the bond between them strengthen. Kaelen answered each challenge with the calm confidence she had come to admire, his every word an assurance of their unity. They had come here to solidify their place, not just as rulers, but as a team. Amelia stood beside him, not as a silent observer, but as an active participant in the future they were building together. The negotiations were long, but Kaelen and Amelia faced them together, each moment drawing them closer. Amelia had learned so much in the time she had been with Kaelen, about strength, leadership, and the power of love. As the final agreement was made, Kaelen turned to her, his expression softening. "We've done it," he said quietly, his voice filled with pride. Amelia smiled up at him, feeling the weight of everything they had accomplished. They had proven not only their strength, but their bond. "Together," she replied, her voice full of certainty. "Always together." As they left the meeting grounds, the cold wind had died down, and the moon rose high in the sky, casting a silver light over the land. Kaelen and Amelia walked side by side, their hands intertwined. Amelia had found her place in this world, not as an outcast, but as Kaelen's mate, his equal. And in that moment, as the moonlight bathed them both in its glow, Amelia knew that their journey was just beginning. The future was theirs to create, and she was ready to face it, by Kaelen's side, as his partner, as his love, forever. In a world where power, strength, and destiny collide, Amelia's journey into the world of werewolves begins when she unknowingly serves wine to the Alpha King, Kaelen, and is claimed as his mate. As an Omega, Amelia has always been overlooked and rejected, unable to shift into her wolf form. However, the werewolf bond between her and Kaelen transcends her weaknesses and proves that even without a wolf, she is still worthy of love and strength. Together, they face challenges that test their bond, but with each passing day, Amelia grows into her new role as Kaelen's partner, learning the true meaning of strength, love, and leadership in the werewolf kingdom. Their journey leads them to confront powerful leaders, forge alliances, and establish their place in the world of werewolves. With Kaelen by her side, Amelia realizes that her place is not just by the Alpha King's side, but as his equal, his Luna, and his true mate. In this captivating tale of love, power, and werewolf destiny, Amelia's transformation from an outcast to the powerful mate of the Alpha King proves that strength comes from within. Amelia and Kaelen's bond is unbreakable, and together, they prove that love is the greatest strength of all in the werewolf world.